Every year, more than 500,000 Americans over 60 suffer a fall that sends them to the emergency room, and here's what most doctors won't tell you. The majority of those falls happen not because of weak muscles or bad balance, but because of something called proprioception failure, which is just a fancy term for your body losing track of where it is in space. Your brain stops getting clear signals from your feet and joints, and suddenly, a small step off a curb or a slightly uneven floor becomes a fracture waiting to happen. Meanwhile, in a small prefecture in Japan, researchers tracked a group of seniors for 12 years and found that those who practiced one specific 5-minute movement every single morning had fall rates 70% lower than their neighbors. And their hip fracture rates were so low the data looked like a mistake until 3 other studies confirmed the same pattern. Now you might think this is about yoga or Tai Chi, and you'd be half right in spirit but completely wrong in practice. Because what these Japanese elders do takes almost no space, requires zero equipment, and works faster than any balance drill you've seen in a physical therapy office. It's called Tanrin Ashi, which translates roughly to forging the legs. And it's not a stretch or a pose, it's a rhythmic stepping pattern that rewires the nerve highways between your feet and your brain in a way that Western medicine is only now starting to measure and respect. The science behind it involves something called sensorimotor integration, meaning your nervous system learns to process signals from your muscles and skin in real time, so your body can react before your conscious mind even registers a problem. Here's the part that should make you sit up. In one analysis from a geriatric institute in Kyoto, seniors who added Tanrin Ashi to their morning routine showed measurable improvements in single-leg standing time within 2 weeks. And after 8 weeks, their gait speed, which is one of the most reliable predictors of longevity after 60, increased by an average of 15%. Compare that to standard balance exercises taught in most American senior centers, which often take 3 months to show half that improvement. And you start to see why 99% of us are missing the boat. The movement is so simple it sounds boring when you first hear it described, but boring is exactly what your nervous system needs, because repetition with micro-variations is how neural pathways get stronger and faster. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me your age and where you're watching from, because I want to know if you've ever heard of Tanrin Ashi, or if this is completely new information for you. I'm guessing for most of you it's the first time you're seeing this term, and that's not your fault. It's a gap in how we teach healthy aging in this country. We focus so much on cardio and strength that we forget the system that connects those two things, which is your neuromuscular network. And once that network starts to fray after 60, the rest of your fitness doesn't matter much if you can't stay upright. So, here's what I'm going to walk you through today. I'm going to give you the exact protocol for Tanrin Ashi, the way it's taught in Japanese community centers from Okinawa to Hokkaido, and then I'm going to show you the 5 biggest mistakes Americans make when they try it for the first time. Because yes, you can do a simple stepping drill wrong if you don't understand the principles behind it. After that, I'll give you 3 progressions so you can scale the difficulty as you get stronger. And I'll finish with the one modification that makes this safe, even if you've already had a fall, or if you're dealing with neuropathy in your feet, which affects nearly half of people over 70 with diabetes. Number 2 on the list of things that make this so effective is something researchers call haptic feedback amplification. But let's translate that into normal language. When you do Tanrin Ashi correctly, you're not just stepping. You're paying attention to the feeling of your foot making contact with the ground. And that conscious attention actually strengthens the sensory nerves in your feet. Think of it like turning up the volume on a radio signal that's been getting faint. Most of us shuffle through life with our attention somewhere between our phones and our to-do lists, and our feet become numb passengers that we drag along. But this drill forces you to tune in, and that tuning in is what rebuilds proprioception. Here's a detail that surprised even the researchers. When they measured nerve conduction velocity in the feet of seniors before and after 8 weeks of Tanrin Ashi, they found improvements that normally only show up in people who've been doing intensive physical therapy for nerve damage. The movement pattern creates hundreds of tiny balance challenges per session, And each challenge is a signal to your brain that says we need to keep these pathways open and fast. Your brain is ruthlessly efficient. It shuts down systems it thinks you're not using. And if you spend your day sitting or walking on perfectly flat, predictable surfaces, your balance system gets put on standby. Let me tell you about Margaret, 72, a retired librarian from a suburb outside of Portland. Margaret had what she called her close calls, moments where she'd trip on a rug edge or wobble getting out of the car, and she knew something was off, but every test her doctor ran came back normal. Her muscle strength was fine, her vision was fine, her blood pressure was managed, but she didn't feel stable. I walked her through the basic Tanrin Ashi protocol, 5 minutes every morning right after brushing her teeth, and told her to focus on feeling her heel and then her toes making deliberate contact with the floor. 2 weeks later, she called me and said the wobbles were gone. Not reduced, gone, and by 6 weeks she was hiking with her daughter on trails she'd been avoiding for 2 years. So, what exactly is the protocol? You stand with your feet hip-width apart, arms relaxed by your sides or lightly resting on a countertop if you need support at first. You lift your right knee until your thigh is roughly parallel to the ground, or as high as you can get it without tipping over. And here's the key. You pause at the top for 1 full breath. Then you lower your foot slowly and deliberately, placing your heel down first and rolling through to your toes, and you pay attention to every millimeter of that descent. Then you do the same with your left leg. That's 1 cycle. You repeat for 3 minutes to start, which usually works out to about 20 cycles per side, and you do this every single morning before your brain has time to wake up fully and start arguing with you. The reason the morning timing matters is that your nervous system is more plastic, more ready to learn, in the first hour after you wake up. Neuroplasticity doesn't shut off after childhood, but it does have rhythms, and the early morning is a peak window. You're also more likely to be hydrated after sleeping, assuming you drink water when you wake up, and hydration status affects nerve signal speed more than most people realize. If you do this at 10 at night after a long day when you're dehydrated and mentally fried, you'll get maybe 30% of the benefit. But if you do it right after you get out of bed, your brain soaks it up like a sponge. Now here's where people go wrong, and this is mistake number 1. They rush through it. They treat it like a cardio drill, bouncing from leg to leg as fast as they can, and they completely miss the point. Speed is not the goal here. Neural clarity is the goal. If you're moving so fast that you can't feel your heel touch the ground as a distinct event separate from your toes, you're wasting your time. The magic is in the attention you bring to each micro moment of the movement, and that requires slowness. Think of it like practicing a musical scale. You don't play it fast until you can play it clean, and your nervous system works the same way. Mistake number 2 is holding your breath. When you lift your leg and pause at the top, there's a natural tendency to tense up and stop breathing, especially if your balance is shaky. But that breath hold triggers a stress response that actually makes your balance worse. Your muscles get rigid, your proprioceptors get confused by the tension, and you end up reinforcing the exact problem you're trying to fix. So the protocol is, breathe in as you lift, breathe out as you lower, and keep that rhythm steady. If you find yourself holding your breath, you're either lifting your knee too high, or you need to add a light hand on the counter for support. And both of those adjustments are completely fine. Mistake number 3, and this one shows up in about 80% of beginners, is looking down at your feet the entire time. Your eyes are part of your balance system. They're not separate from it, and if you stare at your feet, you're teaching your brain to rely on vision instead of proprioception, which defeats the whole purpose. The goal is to retrain your body to know where your feet are without looking, so once you've got the movement pattern down, you keep your gaze level, looking straight ahead at a point on the wall. If that feels impossible at first, it's a sign of how much your balance system has degraded, and that's exactly why you need this drill. Let me give you a second story because the pattern is so consistent, it's almost eerie. David, 68, former construction foreman, had developed what he called heavy feet. He could still walk fine, but everything felt clunky and effortful, and he'd started using his arms to haul himself up from chairs instead of just standing up smoothly. He taught her Tanrin Ashi and told her to do it every single day without fail, and 2 years later she's still doing it, and her single-leg stand time is better now than it was when she was 50. She'll probably never know if it prevented a fall because prevention is invisible, but her confidence in her body is completely different, and that confidence changes how she moves through the world. Here's a variation that some people find more engaging once they've mastered the basic protocol. Instead of just lifting and lowering in place, you can add a small forward step so you're essentially doing a slow-motion march across the room. The principle is the same. Controlled lift, pause at the top, deliberate placement of the heel, but now you're adding a dynamic element that mimics real-world walking. This is closer to what you actually do when you navigate uneven ground, and it's a nice bridge between static balance drills and functional movement. Start with 3 steps forward, turn around carefully, 3 steps back, and build from there. Another variation for people who get bored easily. Do the movement to music with a steady beat. Not fast music, something like 60 to 70 beats per minute, which is close to a resting heart rate, and time your lifts and lowers to the beat. This adds a rhythm component that can actually improve gait cadence, which is the regularity of your steps, and irregular cadence is a fall risk factor that doesn't get enough attention. Your steps should sound like a metronome, not like a stumble, and practicing to music trains that pattern. Here's the one thing I want you to take away if you forget everything else. The fact that 99% of American seniors have never heard of Tanrin Ashi is not because it doesn't work. It's because our healthcare system is built around treating problems after they happen instead of preventing them before they start. A fall is a billable event. A fracture is a billable event. Surgery and rehab are billable events, but 5 minutes of stepping practice in your kitchen is free, and it keeps you out of the hospital. So there's no financial incentive to teach it. That's not a conspiracy theory, that's just how the system is structured, and it means you have to take responsibility for your own prevention. Japan has a different model. They have community health programs that teach these drills to everyone over 60 as a matter of course, and their hip fracture rates are a fraction of ours even though their population is older on average. Part of that is diet, part of that is walkability and public transportation, but a big part of it is that they teach balance training as aggressively as we teach cholesterol management, and we should be doing the same. Until we do, you have to be your own advocate and seek out the information yourself, which is what you're doing right now by watching this. One last practical note. If you travel, this is the perfect exercise to take with you because it requires no equipment and about 4 square feet of space. Hotel rooms, airport lounges if you're shameless enough, your kid's living room during a visit, anywhere you can stand for 5 minutes works. The consistency matters more than the location, and one of the biggest reasons people lose their balance gains is that they stop practicing when their routine gets disrupted. If you commit to doing this every single morning, no matter where you are, it becomes automatic, and automatic is how habits stick. So here's your homework. Tomorrow morning, before you do anything else, before coffee, before checking your phone, stand next to your kitchen counter and do 3 minutes of Tanrin Ashi. Focus on the feeling of your heel and toes. Breathe through the lifts and lowers and keep your gaze level. Do it again the next day and the next, and by the end of 2 weeks you'll feel the difference. If you don't, come back and tell me, because in 5 years of teaching this, I've never had someone do it correctly for 2 weeks and not notice a change. Now, I want to hear from you. Which part of this protocol sounds most challenging for you? The slowness, the eye contact, the breathing, or something else? And what's one other balance struggle you deal with that you wish you could fix? Drop a comment and let me know, because your experience helps other people realize they're not alone in this. His doctor told him it was normal aging, which is code for I don't have a solution, and sent him home. I taught him Tanrin Ashi with one modification, which I'll get to in a minute, and had him do it every morning for 4 weeks. By week 3, he texted me a video of himself standing on one leg for 30 seconds, something he hadn't been able to do in 5 years, and his gait had gone from a shuffle to an actual heel-toe stride. The change wasn't in his muscles, those were fine. The change was in the wiring. Here's the progression system. And this is important because if you stay at the beginner level forever, you'll plateau and stop seeing gains. Beginner level is what I just described. Both hands available for light support if needed, knee lift as high as comfortable, 3 minutes total. After 2 weeks, if you can do the full 3 minutes without wobbling or needing to grab the counter, you move to intermediate. Hands off the counter, arms by your sides, knee lift aiming for thigh parallel to the ground. And you add a second pause when your foot is hovering 1 inch above the floor before you make contact. That extra pause at the bottom is deceptively hard because it's where most people lose their balance in real-world situations, like when you're lowering your foot onto a stair you can't quite see. After another 2 weeks at intermediate, if you're solid, you move to advanced. Same movement, but now you close your eyes for the entire cycle. Closing your eyes removes vision from the equation completely and forces your proprioceptors and vestibular system to do all the work, and this is where the real rewiring happens. Most people are shocked at how much harder it is with eyes closed, even if they thought their balance was pretty good, and that shock is valuable information. You don't stay at advanced level for long in a single session. Maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute max because the neural fatigue is intense. But those short bursts create adaptation faster than anything else. Now, if you're dealing with neuropathy, especially in the bottom of your feet, you need a modification because the whole drill depends on feeling the floor, and if you can't feel the floor, you're building a house on sand. The modification is simple. Do the movement barefoot and do it on a textured surface. A yoga mat works, or a large towel folded in half, or even a piece of rubber shelf liner. Anything that gives your feet something to grip and feel that's different from smooth tile or hardwood. The texture amplifies the signal that does get through, and over time, consistent practice can actually reduce neuropathy symptoms by encouraging your nervous system to pay attention to that area again. I've seen people who thought they'd lost sensation in their toes permanently start to feel tingling, and then pressure, and then actual tactile detail after 3 months of daily practice. And it's because use it or lose it applies to sensory nerves just as much as it applies to muscles. Here's the science interlude that connects all of this. Your brain has a map of your body called the somatosensory cortex. And the size of the territory devoted to each body part isn't based on the actual size of that body part. It's based on how much sensory information that part sends to your brain. Your hands take up huge real estate because you use them constantly for fine motor tasks. But for a lot of people over 60, the foot area of that map has shrunk to almost nothing because they've stopped giving their brain interesting foot information. Tanrin Ashi is a way of reclaiming that territory, of telling your brain that feet matter and we need processing power dedicated to them again. When researchers do brain scans on people before and after balance training like this, they literally see the foot area of the cortex expand. It's not a metaphor. It's a structural change. One more mistake that's worth calling out. Mistake number 4 is doing this in shoes, especially thick-soled shoes or slippers. You want as much direct contact between your foot and the ground as the surface allows, and shoes are sensory dampeners. They're designed to protect your feet from the ground, which means they block the exact signals you're trying to amplify. If the floor is cold or you're worried about hygiene, thin socks are okay, but barefoot is ideal. And this is not a dirty floor problem. This is a neural input problem. So do it somewhere clean and flat where you feel safe going barefoot. Mistake number 5 is expecting this to replace all other exercise, and it doesn't. Tanrin Ashi is a targeted intervention for proprioception and balance, and it works brilliantly for that. But you still need cardiovascular work and you still need resistance training to keep your muscles and bones strong. Think of this as the missing piece, not the only piece. A lot of people over 60 do great on treadmills or lift weights twice a week and still fall because nobody told them to train their balance system. And this is how you fill that gap. 5 minutes a day, every day, and it integrates with everything else you're already doing. Let's talk about timing in a different way, because when you do this within your day matters almost as much as doing it at all. The absolute best time is first thing in the morning, like I said. But the second best time is right before you do something that requires balance, like gardening or going for a walk or even cooking, because the drill primes your nervous system and makes it more alert and responsive for the next 30 to 60 minutes. Think of it as a pre-game warm-up for your proprioceptors. A lot of falls happen during transitions, when you move from one activity to another and your brain is still in the previous mode. So doing Tanrin Ashi right before you head out the door or right before you go down to the basement is a form of insurance. Here's another layer that researchers in Japan emphasize: the social component. In community centers where this is taught, people do it together, not because you need a group to make it work, but because accountability and social connection are themselves longevity factors. If you can talk a friend or a spouse into doing 5 minutes of Tanrin Ashi with you every morning, your adherence rate will double. And adherence is what determines whether this changes your life or becomes another thing you tried once and forgot. You don't need a class or a fancy instructor. You just need somebody else who's willing to stand in the kitchen with you and lift their knees for 3 minutes before breakfast. One thing that stops people from starting is the belief that if they're already unsteady, they shouldn't try something that might make them fall. That fear is understandable but backward, because the way you fix unsteadiness is by practicing controlled instability, not by avoiding movement. The difference is that you control the environment, you do it next to a counter or a sturdy chair, you start at the easiest level, and you give yourself permission to take weeks to progress instead of days. Nobody is asking you to stand on one leg in the middle of the room with your eyes closed on day 1. That would be reckless. But standing on one leg with your hand on the counter and your eyes open is safe and it's effective. Let's talk about the neurological side one more time, because this is where the misunderstanding happens. Most people think balance is about strength, and strength is part of it, but balance is mostly about speed of signal transmission. When you start to tip, your body has maybe 200 milliseconds to fire the right muscles in the right sequence to catch you, and if the signal from your foot to your brain is slow or noisy, those 200 milliseconds run out before the correction happens. Tanrin Ashi makes the signal faster and cleaner, and that's why people see results so quickly. You're not building new muscle, you're tuning the communication network, and networks can change in days or weeks if you give them the right input. Here's a detail that applies specifically to people with arthritis in the knees or hips. If lifting your knee to parallel is painful, don't force it. Lift to whatever height feels challenging but not sharp, and stay there. The proprioceptive benefit comes from the act of holding your leg up and then controlling the descent, not from hitting a specific angle. Some people start with a knee lift of only 6 inches, and that's perfectly fine. The brain doesn't care about the geometry. It cares about the attention and the control. Over time, as the supporting muscles get stronger and the joint settles, you'll naturally be able to lift higher, but there's no trophy for thigh parallel if it's shredding your cartilage. Now here's the thing nobody talks about but everyone needs to hear. Balance training has a cognitive benefit that's almost as strong as the physical benefit. Studies in neurology journals have shown that exercises requiring coordination and proprioception activate areas of the brain involved in spatial reasoning and memory, and seniors who do regular balance work score better on cognitive tests than those who only do cardio or strength training. Your brain likes novelty and challenge, and Tanrin Ashi, especially once you start closing your eyes or adding variations, is both. You're giving your brain a puzzle to solve every single morning, and that keeps it sharp. Let me give you one more vignette, and this one hits different because it's about prevention rather than recovery. Linda, 63, no major health issues, active, walks her dog every day, does yoga once a week, and came to me not because she'd fallen but because her mother had fallen and broken a hip at 70, and she was terrified of the same trajectory. She wanted to know what she could do now to make sure that didn't happen to her.